Because you're basically insinuating that refs are getting paid. People think that the game is not fixed. And we can if we ever get to the point, any sport, if they found out, it will ruin the sport. It will ruin the sport.
Welcome to the Hidden Scoreboard.
Hello.
Hey, Jordee, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good. If you're new to the show, this is where we combine sports and conspiracies, two of our favorite things. We invite you to question everything you thought you knew about your favorite teams, your favorite players, coaches, and sports situations alike. So this is the Hidden Scoreboard. Before we get too far into it, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Go leave us a 5-star review. That's what keeps us out there in the algorithm. It makes all the difference to us and helps the show grow. Jordee, have you ever heard the conspiracy about the Arizona Cardinals being cursed?
No.
Okay.
No,
I hadn't either, to be transparent with you. This is something I found when doing like research and trying to figure out different stuff for the show. And I thought this one was really interesting. So I kind of grabbed it and thought, this would be a good one to talk to Jordee about.
I feel like this is going to be interesting because if you think of a team that's cursed, that's not one that comes to mind at all.
Right. If you're thinking NFL teams, I'm thinking Detroit Lions. I'm thinking Cleveland Browns. I'm thinking maybe Carolina Panthers. Cardinals, I'm not thinking that quite so much. But after doing the research, I got to say I'm pretty convinced. By the way, I am Sky, the sports guy. I'm one of your hosts. The other host joining me is Jordee. If you don't know too much about Jordee, one thing you do need to know about him is he is a music man. Jordee, why don't you tell the people about your music?
Yeah, I started dabbling in the music roughly, 3 years ago. I started releasing music like 2 years ago. I've always been intrigued by it. I go by the name of Jordee. It's also my nickname. And just to take a shout out for a second too, one of my really good friends, Lance, he goes by the artist name Damn Tyler. He definitely kind of helped get me into that lane and shared a lot of knowledge, and we share a lot of thoughts on music, and I just got into the creation side of it, and it's something I found that I truly enjoy. And I can say I have been now streamed further than just America, so that's really awesome. And if you want to check me out, I'm on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, any major distribution platforms. You can find me. It's Jordee with 2 E's at the end.
Jordee. That spells Jordee.
Yes, sir.
So just wanted to give you a chance to plug your music. I'm a big fan of yours. You know that. So
no, I appreciate it. And anybody that does know me, I don't personally push the content a lot because I just want it to be, a natural liking. I want it to be authentic, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Sure.
So
this conspiracy goes back. It starts, 100 years. And this kind of falls into the other episode we did. If you guys didn't see it, the second episode is about Virginia McCaskey and how she cursed the Chicago Bears. This is another NFL quote unquote curse that we're going to get into, Jordee.
Okay.
And it goes back 100 years, but it really starts in the 1960s. So we're going to go in the way, way, way back machine here and kind of start in 1925. Okay. So exactly 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And the teams were a lot different back then. Back then it was the Chicago Cardinals was the team. And there was a team right where we're from in Dayton, Ohio, called the Dayton Triangles. So
they actually played the first ever NFL game, if I do remember correctly.
Yeah, first ever NFL game, and I believe it was a Monday night game as well.
Yep.
So pretty cool. So we're part of a little NFL history where we're from. So that was kind of the fun part about doing the research on this as well, is seeing the Dayton Triangles and some of the research I was doing.
That's cool. I often forget that that's a thing.
Yeah. I want to get a jersey. I want to get a Dayton Triangles jersey. So I think they actually sell them at Carolyn Park in Dayton, Ohio, where the Historic Society is. So
It's kind of fun if you go down a rabbit hole and you look at the old NFL teams, and not only where some teams used to be, but the fact that there's some teams that you would never even know were on the map, that just aren't there no more.
Well, that's part of this curse. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you kind of like the way this episode's going to go today is I'm going to give you guys the short version, which the unfortunate reality of this is the NFL granted a championship in 1925 to the Chicago Cardinals, which they truly didn't earn. And ever since, something happened, which we'll get into. After that, something happens, and then in 1960, they are kind of doomed to not win a Super Bowl again. So,
yeah, I want to say that now. Does that Super Bowl stat actually count for them? Because I feel like they're a team that, when playing Madden, I've looked up teams that haven't won a Super Bowl because I want to go there and get them their Super Bowl. I feel like I've seen that name in there as they've never got one.
Correct. So at the time, it was called the NFL Championship. It was not the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I wanted to specify. And they technically did end up winning an NFL championship in 1947.
Okay.
But the curse, like I said, is going to start in the 1960s. But I wanted to start at 1925 because this is the moment, this is the catalyst moment here for this whole thing to start. So the way this episode's going to go is initially I'm going to provide a timeline of the events of the 1925 championship and explore how the Chicago Cardinals became the champions despite not winning the game. Next, I'm going to go over some facts and findings of all of the bad luck the Cardinals have experienced over the last 100 years, which makes me really start to believe in this curse. And then finally, at the end, me and Jordee will kind of discuss kind of our thoughts and emotions and how we feel about this so-called curse. And then Jordee, as always, feel free to chime in whenever you'd like. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
I'm so excited about this. This is the sports nerd in me coming completely out. Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned teams that you've never heard of. Have you ever heard of a city called Pottsville?
No.
Okay. So the Pottsville Maroons is the team that we're going to be discussing. Okay. They are from Pottsville, Pennsylvania, the same place that the Yingling Brewery is, the oldest brewery in America. So kind of a cool thing there. And they're part of like that coal miner triangle. When you talk about like the Pittsburgh Steelers, this was kind of like part of that. Like they're part of that culture of steel and coal, blue collar working people. Okay. So this is a tough city full of people. Okay.
Now, before you jump into this, I just want to give you a very fun NFL sport fact I seen the other day.
Sure.
Larry Fitzgerald finished his career with more tackles than he did drops. Yep. I just why the Cardinals name's brought up. I just think that's wild.
Well, and while you're on that, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, in my opinion, he's one of the most underrated receivers in NFL history. Could you imagine if he actually had a good quarterback throwing to him for his career? I mean, it's nuts. He could have been talent-wise. I would actually put him up there with Jerry Rice. The difference is, look who Jerry had thrown to him.
Yeah. I just think, obviously, if you looked at his stats, and even if you just know NFL, how many snaps he was in the game, how many targets he got, how many touchdowns, anything. He's a receiver. His one job is to catch the ball, and he finished with more tackles. So that means his quarterback threw more interceptions than he had dropped catches. And the fact that he was there to make those tackles, I don't know. It's just a crazy.
Well, and he's fighting with 11 other guys to make the tackle.
Yeah. Just something fun to add into the story here before we dive in.
No, I love it. And I actually had heard that stat too, and I'm glad you said it because that Larry just doesn't get enough credit. Larry, if you ever want to come on the podcast, you're more than welcome.
Absolutely.
So let's set the scene. It's September 17th, 1920, the NFL starts. Okay, so the league had only been around 5 years when this situation arises. Okay, so it's still very early on. 1925, Pottsville Maroons have their very first season in the NFL. They're loaded with what they call hard scrabble minors and high-priced college All-Americans. And so when I say minors, I'm not talking about underage people. We're talking about people who work in coal mines. Okay, these are hard, tough, blue-collar men. Getting tackled is the least of their worries. 1925, it's their first season in the NFL, and they do the unthinkable. They dominate the league. Okay. December 6, 1925, the 9-2 Maroons, they travel to Kaminsky Park, and they beat the 9-1-1 Chicago Cardinals 21-7. All right. So they beat them by 14 points. They beat them by 2 touchdowns.
So they only 11 games in the season. Interesting.
12.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah, and it confused me too because I was trying to figure it out. So, and back then, whoever had the better winning percentage was the champion.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they would kind of make the schedules, they had a feeling for the schedules, and then they would make the best teams start to play each other towards the end. Like the playoff would kind of start before the playoff started, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of like a college, how college does it where they're playing for their conference championship.
Okay.
Does that you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And just to get a little bit knowledge, and if you don't know, that's perfectly fine too. Mm-hmm. Did these teams travel
yes.
to new places? They had exhibition games. How did that stuff work?
Yes, and yes. And that's part of the controversy here. You're on this one. Jordee, you're on it.
Okay. All right.
You're speaking my language. So Pottsville ends up winning, and that puts their record at 10-2. And then the other team loses, right? And that puts their record at 9-2-1. So obviously Pottsville has a better record. At the time, the NFL teams could have more games after the championship to generate revenue. So when you talked about exhibitions, that's what they would do. Kind of going back to, and this was literally 40 years later, almost 40 years later, but we talked about the Wilt Chamberlain stuff where the people that were at that game in Hershey, Pennsylvania, they were also there to watch an exhibition football game for the NFL. That was for those teams to generate more revenue, right? Okay. It was also to expand their fan base. So this is a pretty common practice, even in the beginning of the NFL up until the 60s and 70s. Okay. So anyway, after they win the championship, they set up an exhibition was set up in Philadelphia between the Maroons and the All-Star team featuring Notre Dame's legendary Four Horsemen and other college collegians. So they're going to play college All-Stars, and most notably the Four Horsemen, which if you don't know who the Four Horsemen are, I did a little research on them. 1924, they're a part of Notre Dame's undefeated team, and they're all running backs. And back then you had a halfback, a fullback, a wing back. You have all these other little running backs because they ran a jumbo T formation. So kind of like an option offense. You don't know who's getting handed the ball.
Yeah.
Okay. So these guys.
Sorry, I was just saying my grandmother was born in 1932. She's been a diehard football fan. She's the grandma that's at every home game, rain, shine, sleet, snow, it don't matter. But she has mentioned the Four Horsemen to me before. So just
there you go.
Not that I know a lot about them, but the fact that you said that, and then it kind of hit me that, oh yeah, I have heard of these people. Just kind of a funny fact.
I didn't think you were going to be that into this conspiracy, this curse I'm going through, but you're nailing the exhibitions. You're nailing the Four Horsemen. I'm so glad I picked this one here.
Yeah,
shout out to Mamaw Jordee. So anyway, they're going to play this all-star team of college athletes. And back then, college, and it still is sometimes bigger, than the NFL. But back then it was definitely true. This is the beginning of the NFL where they're still trying to get notoriety and prove that they're legitimate. So this is a big game if they can defeat the college all-stars.
Yeah.
And it'll also make those collegiate players want to go pro, because this is an era too where people are still working multiple jobs for income. It's more for the love of the game. You're getting some compensation. It's actually a 70-30 split with the owners and the players getting 70% of the pot, the owner getting 30% of the pot. So, which the pots weren't that big, but it was a way to make money. So before agreeing to the game, the Maroons received permission from the NFL to take on the Notre Dame All-Star team at the 33,000 seat Shibe Park, which is 3 times as big as their own stadium, which they actually, the Maroons played at like the local high school, so, it didn't take much to be bigger than them. But Philly's Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, which Pottsville had beaten 49-0 in a regular season matchup, claimed that Notre Dame was infringing on their turf. So the Yellow Jackets go, hey, listen, we have territories for a reason. You can't play this game here. It's going to mess, we have a territory agreement and you're not supposed to be here. And they're saying that's an issue. They're saying that's a conflict of interest. So pretty big deal. They go on to play the game and actually win 9-7. So they barely beat the All-Stars. So, it just was what it was, but it helped make the NFL more legitimate that they won. So obviously the Yellow Jackets, they just didn't like this, and they made a big deal about it to the league. And the league ends up going, you know what? That's fine. We're going to revoke the title and we'll give it to the Chicago Cardinals since they broke the rules after the season. So that's kind of the situation here where the Cardinals get a championship that they didn't earn. And that makes the people of Pottsville pretty frustrated, as you can imagine. I will say this. It's noted that the owner at the time of Chicago, Chris O'Brien, refused to accept the title, and he called it bogus. So he did the right thing.
Yeah, definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah. So, Chris does the right thing. 1947, the Chicago Cardinals, they end up winning a legitimate NFL championship. The Bidwell family, though, they bought the team in 1932, so 7 years after this incident happened. 1963, so this is when the curse starts. Okay, are you following me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 1963 comes around, and the Maroons Pottsville fans are still lingering around. And they're petitioning to the Chicago Cardinals, the president, Charles Stormy Bidwell, the current owner, which is Bill. So they're petitioning to get their championship back, but the Cardinals president, Stormy, he's the dad of Bill. So Bill is, Bill's the son. So Bill is actually now in charge, but these fans are reaching out to him.
So they're going after the son.
Right.
Okay.
Well, they're going after the dad, but the son responds.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say here. I didn't want to confuse myself. So they wrote a letter to Red Smith saying essentially that, so they're writing a letter back, the son does, saying that they essentially have no intention of honoring the wishes of this town, and they proceed to call them a hick town. So this is when the curse starts, because they wouldn't give this championship back to these people when it has nothing to do with anything now. I don't see what it would hurt to say, yeah, you guys can have your piece of NFL, history. Regardless of what the rules are, you technically were the winners. So anyway, this is when the curse starts.
Now to imagine that many years later, that team's probably more established. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, and at this point, I didn't tell you here, but they had actually moved on to St. Louis in the
Okay.
60s. Yeah, and then you have the birth of the Chicago Bears instead. The Bears were a team back then, but it was they were across town, and they end up becoming the team for the Chicago area. So now they're in St. Louis, and then we know the story where they eventually get moved to Arizona, where we see them now. So, 2003, it was formally brought up again to the owners when they had an owners meeting there in Philadelphia. There, Rooney, Lurie, and Pottsville Mayor John D. Riley and Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell offered a solution that the then Commissioner Paul Talabue's blessing to let the Cards and the Maroons share the title. So 2000, I mean, this thing had been going on almost 80 years at this point, and they're trying to get them to share it. According to Rooney and Riley, a Bidwell interfered again. So that's the family that owns them. Bill Bidwell, who served on a 3-man committee that studied the dispute title, convinced his fellow owners to squash the Pottsville petition, and they did a 30-2 vote. So 30 people of the 32 owners, 30 of them said, no, you're not getting the championship. It's staying a part of the Chicago Cardinals.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, this guy went way out of his way to keep a title that his family had nothing to do with. I mean, it's just the whole thing's very immature in my mind. So, anyway, so the thing is that since then, since the 60s, 1963, they have been cursed. So I pulled a bunch of bad luck games here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 examples. 7 examples of bad luck games that I wanted to go through. And these are recent games. Okay. I wasn't going to do the full 100 years or whatever it is, 60 years for time's sake, right? I don't think anyone wants to listen to me ramble for the next 3 days because it's a lot of bad luck they've had. But starting with my first piece of evidence here, 1998 NFC Championship game. Okay. It's a pivotal game against the Dallas Cowboys. A controversial pass interference call on cornerback Aeneas Williams, which at the time was like their big defensive back. He's really good. Late in the fourth quarter, significantly impacted the outcome, and many felt that the call was questionable and contributed to the Cardinals' loss. So he had this PI. Cowboys ended up going on to win the game. 2008 Super Bowl. Okay, everybody remembers this Super Bowl. It's a nail-biting finish. The Pittsburgh Steelers in a crucial non-call. People say that it was pass interference on the Steelers, but it didn't get called in the final moments of the game. And the Cardinals end up losing this 27-23. And people really say that no call was a big deal. That's the same game where James Harrison has the 99-yard pick six. If you guys are trying to
oxygen mask and
Yep.
I could say that's one of the first Super Bowls that I really remember in my head.
I love that Super Bowl. At the time I was rooting for Kurt Warner. He's got an incredible story. I was rooting for our guy Fitzgerald that we just talked about. But I'm also kind of like, I was a low-key fan of a few guys on that team. A receiver named Antoine Randall L. He threw a pass for a touchdown as a receiver. People didn't realize he was also a quarterback in college. He actually threw for 2,000 yards and received for 1,000 yards in his collegiate career. So very, very talented athlete. He was a good return man is what he was really known for.
I want to say that Super Bowl was 2009, by the way.
I got my notes 2008 here.
Okay. I mean, neither here or there, but just for
Sure.
everybody listening, that's what I remember it as, but I don't think it has a whole lot to do with the story. But
no, you're fine. And my next note here is 2009 regular season game versus San Francisco 49ers. There's another controversial call that involved missing a roughing the passer penalty on 49ers linebacker Ahmad Brooks, who hit Kurt Warner. This resulted in a fumble, and it was returned for a touchdown. Many argued that Brooks should have been penalized for hitting Warner late, but he didn't, and they lost that game. 2015 regular season game against New England. In a very closely contested game, a controversial offensive pass interference call on Cardinals wide receiver Michael Floyd negated a potential game-winning touchdown late in the fourth quarter. The Cardinals ultimately lost that game.
I watched that game, by the way.
You remember that call?
I do.
Yep. Which questionable. I thought it was a 50-50 ball back then. Now that I'm reading this, it's like maybe there's something to it.
Yeah.
2017 regular season game versus Tampa Bay. Another call where the game involved a touchdown that was initially ruled a catch by Cardinals tight end Jermaine Gresham, but was later returned upon review. The decision to overturn the call caused frustration among Cardinals fans. 2019 regular season game against New Orleans Saints. In this game, a questionable roughing the passer call against the Cardinals allowed the Saints to extend their drive, ultimately score a touchdown. This call was just debated upon everybody. It was a big, big thing. It was like on all the sports shows. And then in 2021 regular season game versus Green Bay, in a critical game, a controversial call was made with a potential game-winning touchdown catch by Cardinals receiver A.J. Green. I don't know if you remember this. Was intercepted by the Packers. Many felt like there was a lack of offensive pass interference on the play. So there's some recent games where it's just like it didn't go their way. And I'm sure if we did this same research on any NFL team and you gave me the last 25 years to research, I could probably find 8 to 10 games that they had some bad luck. So I wasn't fully convinced just off the games. I started to get convinced with the draft picks. Now, I know drafting players is hard, but it's almost impossible to be as bad as the Arizona Cardinals on draft picks. So here's like a more recent one here. Josh Rosen, 2018, first round, 10th overall. He was pretty good at UCLA. He was kind of, everybody was pretty hyping him up. However, he struggled his rookie season. And that he ended up getting traded to the Miami Dolphins after just one season. Yep. Very, very rarely is a quarterback drafted and traded that quickly. A lot of times they're just benched if they don't work out. Dan Williams, 2010, first round, 26th overall. Defensive tackle who showed flashes of potential, but ultimately never became a game-changing player. He played 4 seasons with the team, and then before moving on to the Oakland Raiders, but did not make an impact there. Levi Brown, 2007, first round, 5th overall as an offensive tackle. Brown was expected to be the anchor of the offensive line. However, he struggled with consistency and injuries throughout his career, often criticized for his performance. He eventually was released after several seasons and did not live up to the draft status. Number 4, Kerry Rhodes, 2005, 4th round, 4th overall. Rhodes had a productive career after leaving the Cardinals, but his time in Arizona was marked with inconsistency and underwhelming performances. The Cardinals traded him to the New York Jets, where he found a lot more success. So he gets traded, and all of a sudden he's better.
And that's a crazy team to find success at.
The Jets, right? Hakeem Butler, 2019, 4th rounder, 103rd overall. Butler was expected to be a key contributor at wide receiver, but he struggled with injuries once again, inconsistent with his time on the team, was waived after just one season. Thought was crazy. I didn't even know he was drafted by the Cardinals. Vince Wilfork. You remember him?
I do.
So first round, 15th overall, didn't do anything on the Cardinals. And then he was released after just 2 seasons, but we ended up seeing what he ended up doing with the Patriots.
That's how I know the name.
Yep. And then he went on to be like a all pro for the Texans for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, he was legit, dude. Number 7, Brock Osweiler, 2012, 2nd round, 57th overall.
I forgot about that name.
Yep. Didn't do much. Gets traded to the Broncos. He wins a couple of playoff games on that run with Peyton Manning. Kind of crazy. Number 8, DJ Humphries here, 2015. First round, 24th overall. He had moments of success. Once again, he was injured. So almost all these guys that were drafted high, they either got hurt or once they went somewhere else, they did good. Just crazy. So I still wasn't convinced, Chris. I still wasn't convinced.
I'm with you. You don't really got me on much yet. So.
Okay, well, here's where I'm starting to see a lot of bad luck. What's the most important position to not have bad luck at?
Quarterback.
Okay. Kurt Warner, 2008. Warner was instrumental in leading the Cardinals to their first Super Bowl appearance in the 2008 season. However, he suffered a concussion in the NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles, which sparked concerns about his health. He returned to play in the Super Bowl, but was unable to secure a victory against the Steelers. People say, that concussion was a big part of why he was off of his game a little bit. Another veteran quarterback they brought in was Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer, 2014 and 15. He had a breakout season in 2015, turned the team around to an 11-5 record. Unfortunately, he suffered an ACL tear in the late 2014, and it ended his season. The following year, he suffered a finger injury that hampered his performance during the playoffs. And then they lost to the Panthers in the NFC Championship game.
That was when Cam Newton was there, correct?
Yep. And then Cam Newton ends up going on to lose for the Broncos, that same Broncos team that had Brock Osweiler. Yep. It's all tied together. Emmitt Smith, 2003. He's a Hall of Fame running back. He joins, ends up having a shoulder injury, has to leave in 2004. So Josh Rosen, which we already mentioned, multiple injuries, gets traded. This leads to Kyler Murray being drafted, by the way. So Kyler Murray gets drafted, and then he leads them to a pretty good season. 2022, he tears his ACL. So now team's not sure what to do. David Johnson, rising star, one of the top running backs in the league at the time. 2017 season, he ends up getting injured. Aeneas Williams, we talked about him earlier, the cornerback, ended up suffering a knee injury in the 2000 season. Kind of plagued him his whole career. He was still productive, but he just wasn't the same athlete he was. Patrick Peterson, another big DB on the team, 2019. He is a top tier corner. He's in violation of the enhancing drug policy. Even though that's not like a typical injury, he gets caught.
Yeah, he was a monster too. I mean, he was good.
Pretty good athlete. So
I just wish I knew more about these guys' draft stock when you're referring. I know a few names, but just off the top of my head, Kyler Murray was one that was already a question. He showed talent. He's little, he's undersized, he's this, he's that.
And people didn't know if he was going to play baseball because he got drafted in baseball the same year.
Yep, he got drafted in the MLB. So I just thinking of that on why you're naming through these people makes me wonder. I wish I knew more of their draft stock to dive more into the conspiracy. But you named off quite a bit of pretty good names that just didn't nothing for him.
And for this, I know this is a curse, conspiracy, whatever we're talking about, and I didn't want the whole episode to be just unloading information. But this is a lot of bad luck.
Yeah.
This is a legit amount of bad luck. Every good quarterback they gets hurt or doesn't work out. Somebody who's not on this list that we should have talked about is Matt Leinart. He was a quarterback for USC, Heisman winner, comes in, doesn't do anything in the NFL. I mean, it's just terrible.
One of the biggest busts
ever.
Ever that's talked about when you talk about busts in NFL at quarterback positions.
Yeah, he's on the list, So, and then it's you mix that in with the quarterback's not working out or getting hurt. You look at when they have had success, what's happened. As soon as they have something to build on, it's either the quarterback gets hurt or something doesn't work out, and then you have all the other stuff too. I mean, it's just rough. It's just rough. It's they're stuck in mediocrity, And when I started to research this, I thought, I don't know if I believe in curses, what we normally talk about is conspiracies, but it sounds like, the Bidwells, they started this thing with Pottsville. And until they won a championship 1947, they owned the team as early as 32. But when Pottsville came to them about, hey, we want credit for our championship, and they're like, no, we're not going to give any credit to some hick town. That really, really started the curse there. And if we want to see, I actually have a clip here to show you of how important this is to the city of Pottsville. It's a quick news clip. Do you want to see it?
Yeah.
Did you know Northeastern PA had its very own NFL team nearly 100 years ago? In fact, the Pottsville Maroons were once NFL champs. That title would be taken away, but generations later, people in Pottsville are still loving their team. 2822's morning anchor Tom Williams has the story.
They won the championship in 1925, and it was taken away from them.
People have been fighting to right that wrong for the last 100 years.
Still today, many in Pottsville believe the Maroons are the rightful 1925 NFL champions. But according to the NFL, the Cardinals, playing in Chicago at the time, own that title.
It's terrible. It was one of the greatest travesties in professional sports.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of different documentaries on YouTube if you guys want to go watch those. And it will kind of break your heart for the people who played in that game, what it meant to that city. And it's probably, I can only imagine how financially it impacted the city. If they were able to keep that franchise and build on that championship, who knows? We could have had the Pottsville Maroons as a part of the NFL.
Yeah. It looked like a pretty cool little town just from those clips I just seen.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's where the Yingling Brewery is. It's the oldest brewery in America, so it's a city with a lot of history. I think part of the conspiracy is, for me, not just what happened to the Cardinals, but if you go back and look at Pottsville and the research I was doing, you've got the Philadelphia team at the time. You've got a Chicago team. These cities, you've got a Pittsburgh team. These cities have always been bigger, and bigger cities usually drive more revenue. I almost wonder if this was an excuse to get rid of a small market team who comes in, has instant success. All the big teams and big cities are like, yeah, we don't like this. Because it was said that they had permission to have that game in Philly. They had verbal permission from somebody at the league. And then they just go ahead and take the championship away from them. That feels like a conspiracy.
Yeah.
So the question is that a conspiracy, or are the Cardinals really cursed? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think there was enough evidence to lean me one way or the other, to be honest. I think if you go back, like you said, if you broke down games, how many bad calls there was, I think that's for everybody.
Right.
It would be, I think I'd be more sold if it was like playoff games or games they needed for the playoffs, which I know every game in the NFL does count.
Sure.
You can't afford, you can afford 3, maybe 4 losses, and then you're getting into the iffy situation.
Right.
And every team is notorious for not doing great with drafts. There's a few that have great drafts, but I wonder, small market teams just struggle in general. You said, that's a small town. St. Louis, it's
Pottsville.
But how much success has St. Louis had?
Right. Well, in Pottsville, they were out of the league within 3 years.
Yeah.
They win their first year, and then it's downhill from there.
That's the only thing that I'm like, could be, because how do you have so much success and then go step fast? That's a big decline.
It almost feels like the league conspired and goes, yeah, these guys can't be here. In your opinion, do you think they deserve the 1925 title?
Yeah, no, I think without a doubt they do. Rightfully so.
So I found a clip of the starting lineup from that game, and I wanted to play the clip, but I also wanted to mention before I play the clip, you remember how bad the audio was from our Wilt Chamberlain video?
It's even worse, huh?
No, it's substantially better, and it's from 1925. The Chamberlain audio is from 1962.
Wow.
So I know we're not talking about the Wilt conspiracy tonight, but when I heard this, it really kind of doubled down on the Wilt conspiracy for me.
Yeah.
on how can I have this great recording from 1925 and not 1962?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions like we talked about was technology. Well, it wasn't that great then. It wasn't this, it wasn't that, but you're going 35, 40 years earlier and it's better.
And I feel like what I'm about to play for you is very, very easy to listen to.
Okay.
So I'm going to play the clip, and I want to honor those players and those players' families and the people of Pottsville. Me and Jordee, we believe that you guys are the rightful champions, and if we need to sign a petition for you guys, we will.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Introducing the starting players from the Pottsville Maroons. Left end from Lafayette, Charlie Berry. Left tackle from Indiana, Russ Hathaway. Left guard, Frank Rassus. Center from Pittsburgh, Bert Stein. Right guard from Penn State, Duke Osborne. Right tackle from Washington and Jefferson, Russ Stein. Right end from Detroit Mercy, Frank Booker. Quarterback from Lafayette, Jack Ernst. Left halfback from West Virginia Wesleyan, Hoop Flanagan. Right halfback from Dayton, Armin Martin. Fullback from Penn State, Barney Wentz. And the head coach, Dick Roush. And the rest of the Pottsville Maroons.
Maroons.
That audio is way better than I expected it to be.
Me too. I was shocked. I started playing it and I'm like, wait a minute. Like, you can hear the fans and there's a little bit of feedback, but it's 100 years old. And you've got to deal with the echo of an outdoor stadium. And I can't believe how much better it is than the Chamberlain audio. Like, it's just shocking. The whole thing's just.
It's not far off from if you were at like a fair
game today.
Or concessions where it's just, you just hear it, the audio from the speakers. Yeah.
I mean, it was listenable, so, but yeah, I mean, that's all I've got. I don't know if it's an actual curse. I think what we're both saying is fair. I could probably look at any team in the last 20, 25 years that hasn't won a Super Bowl and go, yeah, I can make a case for bad luck or being cursed for any of them, for like the Browns or, whoever. But I do think there could have been a conspiracy to get the Maroons out of the league. I know from the research I've read that they were given permission and then that permission was taken away. And I really feel like that Philadelphia Yellow Jacket team at the time, I think they were just salty about losing zero. They had 0 and the Maroons had 49. So yeah. I think there's a bit of jealousy, a bit of envy, a bit of greed. You got bigger market teams preying on a small market team. And I think even back then, the NFL knew that it wasn't good for business, and they did what they did.
Yeah, and I think, when you're thinking that far back, when you're just on the outside looking in, you're like, dude, it was almost 100 years ago. It doesn't matter. But if you're from a small town like that, when
it matters,
there's not a whole lot of attention there, and there's not a whole lot, maybe historical stuff, and that they were one of the first teams set in stone. They won. They don't get it. Then they just get shambled downhill. Team moves. I mean, it would be, yeah. And in a small town like that too, a lot of names, I'm from a small town. A lot of names repeat through years and decades. And, that's ancestors and, so on and so forth. I think rightfully so that they should feel some type of way.
Yeah. And then the new owners of the Chicago Cardinals at the time, they're like, yeah, we're not giving you your championship. Especially not some hick town.
Yeah.
Like totally inappropriate, totally unprofessional. It's one thing to tell them no. It's another thing to accuse them of being anything other than normal. It's just not very classy. So for those reasons, I will continue to be a Browns fan and not a Cardinals fan. And I will, the only team in Pennsylvania I'll be rooting for is the Pottsville Maroons.
Well, I mean, I don't know if being a Browns fan is much better, but hey, whatever works for you.
Guys, we appreciate you listening. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review. Go on our Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube. Leave us the review. It helps push us out in the algorithm. Also, drop a comment. Do you agree? Do you think there's a conspiracy here? Do you think the curse is real? Is there anything that you want us to dive into and do the research on? But we just appreciate you guys listening. We will see you guys next Monday at 12:15.
There was a lot said by everybody, except for me, to tell you the truth. So we'll let people keep talking like they know everything, like they have all the answers. And then sooner or later, the whole truth will come out. And until then, we'll continue to let people talk.